It's a story old as time. A hurricane is bearing down on the place where you live. What do? Do you ride it out? Do you flee? Whose advice do you listen to? Do you listen to the Weather Channel and all those meteorologists and so-called experts? Do you listen to the New York Post and all their sensationalists? Or do you listen to a hipster that works at the retro arcade and tells you that the most underrated musical artist of the last 100 years is TLC? Okay, so my experience with Hurricane Sandy in 2012. It was October 2012, actually getting pretty close to Halloween. And to properly tell the story of Hurricane Sandy, you have to back up about 14 months and look at Hurricane Irene. This was a hurricane that was just barreling up the coast towards New York and New Jersey. And at the time, I was living out in the suburbs and commuting in. So I would go to Port Authority, which is around like 41st, 42nd Street, I think. And I would walk from there to 34th Street, where I worked at Madison Square Garden. And, you know, it's a pretty nice long walk and a lot of people. So you hear the topics going on. And New York City was just buzzing about this hurricane. Everybody from the guy, you know, making bagels in the food truck all the way to up to the, you know, CEOs up in the offices. That is all everybody was talking about. Are you going to stay? Are you going to go? You know, how bad do you think it's going to be? And, you know, and I think also it really hits the media really hard because, I mean, all those cable news networks, I mean, they're all based in New York City because so now you're talking about those people that are talking, this is like where they live. So of course there's a lot of interest. It's all they want to talk about. So with all that hubbub going on about this big storm, it kind of fizzled and then it missed New York. Now it hit other places. It hit New England, it hit Long Island. There was some flooding, but really when it comes to New Yorkers, you know, if it didn't happen in New York City, it didn't happen. And so, you know, the next week after that, it was all everyone was talking about it was just celebrating the failure of the Weather Service and the Weather Channel getting everybody worked up about this, you know, because I mean, and there was a lot of hype around it. You know, I remember that Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel is down at the Jersey Shore with his like blue raincoat on, standing there with his microphone and the wind blowing him, and the guys back at the studio have taken off the sports coat and like rolled up their sleeves to let you know we mean business. And you know, so they're, and of course, I mean, New York Post was going nuts about it. And when it didn't happen, you know, I mean, everybody was just so excited, and it was just the worst and best of New York City, because it was just like everybody just running their mouths about it, and it was all they were talking about. And yeah, and there were actually t-shirts made that said I survived Hurricane Irene, and it just had like a picture of a lawn chair knocked over. So there was that. So a year later, 14 months to be exact, it's almost Halloween, here comes another storm, and everybody's talking about it again, but this time it is how much they aren't going to prepare for it, because it's another sensationalized pile of crap from the Weather Channel. So it's a little bit different for us this time, because between Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy, we moved to Jersey City. And so we are just 1 mile from the water. We're right by where the Hudson dumps into the ocean. And so I actually have a decision to make this time. You know, are we going to ride this out, or are we going to go stay with family inland? And I could already tell that my work was going to be jerks about it. We had a communications person who would send out emails company-wide, and, you know, it would start off with like, first and foremost, we are concerned about the safety of all our employees. However, comma, and then it would start to go into, hey, this is an event-driven business, and we need you to make it to work if at all possible. And so I was already getting the full court press on making it to work. And meanwhile, we'd actually spent, I was part of IT, and we had spent, you know, probably $1 million+ on a remote access solution so we could dial in or, get into work from home. And they just never let us use it. They did not trust us one bit. They figured that if some people have to be there because they work the events and other people don't, then people are going to be complaining and they don't want to even have the question. So everybody just has to show up. Now, of course, I could go there and just sit around and watch YouTube all day, but they just want me there. So, to say they were cold is an understatement about this stuff. Let's just be mean for a minute. I think that if you could work in management there and at the end of the day, look yourself in the mirror and be happy with who you saw, you automatically get a free admit to the pit of hell when you die. I don't know if that's overstating things, but, they were basically the kind of people that could see a baby fall into like a garbage disposal and think, no, that's user error. So they didn't give a crap, and I definitely felt the pressure that I was going to have to get to work. And I knew out in the suburbs, if it's bad weather, if it's, a lot of times they're a little lax on, the buses aren't going to run today, or, that kind of thing. And I knew the PATH station, they were on top of it. If that thing wasn't underwater, they were going to run. So I felt like I needed to ride it out. So we were in Jersey City. We were right on top of the Christopher Columbus PATH station. If you would like to MapQuest this and read along. So it was a very hipsterific neighborhood. And, this was like the hipster sweet spot, because like there's a movie called Ghost Dog that was made in the early 90s. Really good movie with Forrest Whitaker. And the entire point of that movie was what a terrible neighborhood it was. Like, that's what made the movie possible. And this was that neighborhood. But it had gone through this, it was kind of mid-gentrification. And it was like a hipster's dream because it still had this kind of gritty looking element to it. And you would have like a crackhead here and there. But it was like all the like check cashing places were now like kombucha places. And there was lots of little microbrew pubs and coffee shops and brunch places. So it had all that stuff that hipsters like, but they could still kind of pretend like they lived in a tough neighborhood. And so it was very hipsterific there. And you know what? Let's be mean again. Let's talk about hipsters. Okay, so I don't want this to sound mean or hateful or anything, but just consider it mildly annoyed. And this might seem weird coming from me if you knew me maybe 20 years ago when I lived in Austin. I hung around a lot of people, not close friends, but I had a lot of acquaintances who were what you would call hipsters. Now in Austin, we just called them people because everybody in Austin was like that way before it was cool. They were hipsters before hipsters were hipsters. And I became quite disillusioned with that scene because, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, because you realize when you talk to them that what is most important to them is their individuality and being different. But somehow this manifests itself in having the exact same facial hair as other hipsters, having the same haircut, having the same political beliefs, and, of course, having a hipster hobby. So what is a hipster hobby, you ask? Let's just put it this way. If you check those other boxes, if you have the beard, you have the haircut, you have the clothes, if you have, let's add another one, several tattoos, but one in a very noticeable spot that has a really deep backstory that you've practiced in the mirror that makes you sound cool. If you check those boxes, think to yourself, do I have a store where I make farm-to-table artisan canoes? That's a hipster hobby. Am I a big fan of Somalian Premier League soccer because it's more exciting than American sport? Hipster hobby. Do I collect 1920s timepieces with a little chain that goes to my belt loop? You got it. That's a hipster hobby. So what will drive you nuts once you think about it is the hipster hobby is to make them unique and different than everyone else. It's always something old. It's always something that has been, outdated. It's considered obsolete. And the idea is it makes them individual and cool. But the contradiction is by having the hipster hobby, you're just now another hipster. So think about it. So the most important thing to take from all of this, kids, never, ever, ever take important life advice from a hipster, because they will give you great advice about where's a good place to get brunch, what's the best local beer, what is the best place to eat around here, and they're very cool to have skin deep conversations with. But keep in mind, these are the kind of people that will move into a really, really, really rough neighborhood with a very high crime rate just so they can tell you that it's really not that bad. And they will actually get mugged and beaten up and robbed over and over again and insist it's not that bad because they are so committed to it. So their advice on what to do in a hurricane, not helpful. So all of that out of the way. Apologies, hipsters. As I go out to now prepare for this hurricane, I'm not going to do a lot of prep. I'm just going to do a little. I go into a little store and I go buy a 24 pack of water, and I'm standing in line, and I look around and I notice something interesting. So this little bodega I am at, I would say there would normally be 2 or 3 hipsters in there and maybe 10 total people. But for some reason, there were about 15 hipsters in there, and they didn't seem to be shopping. They seemed to just be standing around watching people who were preparing for the hurricane and making fun of them. And I was kind of just curious why they were there, because they were just kind of standing around. And then this guy, just very passive aggressively, I'm standing there with a 24 pack of water. Now keep in mind, I'm not building like a bunker. I'm buying a 24 pack of water. And you know what? If the storm passes by, I'll drink the water. It's all right, So I'm standing there with the water, and this guy says, everyone is like freaking out about the storm and just mass hysteria, and it's probably just gonna hit up around Boston. Okay, so I hate to call into question his meteorological expertise, but how did he decide that it's going to hit Boston? Like all these meteorologists, they don't know where it's going to hit, but he somehow does. Now, I have to consider that perhaps his hipster hobby is he has a old-fashioned weather vane at his house, or maybe, some kind of, turn of the century weather predicting device, or perhaps him and a friend in another city have an old telegram, because I know that they like old stuff, but I'm pretty sure he has no idea what he's talking about. But what I figured out from this is these people aren't going to prepare at all, and they're going to make a point of it, and they're going to talk about it a lot. So I prepared a little. I got a couple of cases of water. I got some food that you didn't have to microwave, you didn't have to refrigerate, because I figure we're on the 15th floor and my car is on the 3rd floor of this parking garage. I don't really have to worry about flooding. Rain, it's wet outside. I'll be inside. Wind, I don't think the wind is going to be strong enough to break through the windows of our apartment. So, and it's not like something is going to be flying, 150, 200 feet in the air and hit our window. So really the concern is power outage. So, I prepare a little bit, and, I fill the bathtub and I get a bunch of candles and figure we're set. So the evening of the storm comes, and I looked down and I noticed, the little hipster sit outside restaurants, there's actually more people there than usual. Like, they are celebrating how much they're not preparing for this. The cars are parked all around the street. Like there is not a single empty spot. Everybody's parked on the street. They are not worried about it. And then it becomes obvious, I want to say it was probably like 5 or 6 in the evening, that this is going to hit us like directly. So I went down to the bottom floor where the mailboxes are, and I heard they'd moved the goal line a little bit. The hipsters were now talking about, oh yeah, it's going to hit here, but it's not going to be that bad. And so they'd moved the goal line to, yes, it is going to hit here, but I'm not too worried about it. And it got dark when I went back upstairs. I love weather, so I moved a recliner up right against the window, and I'm just watching everything. And this rain starts, and it had really kind of barely started raining, and I was already seeing like some flooding in the streets. Keep in mind, I don't know anything about hurricanes, so there was already like a foot of water in the street, which didn't make any sense to me. And I saw a fire truck stop and grab some people and make them get in the fire truck with them, and so they could like leave. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, anyway, I'll keep watching. So I'm watching down there, and you know, if you're ever watching like a disaster movie and there's like a citywide power outage where it kind of, all the lights are on and it kind of goes gung, 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 and like turns off like in little patches and squares. I saw that, and the power goes out. So when our power goes out, I see like 3 different sections go out, and now it's just pitch black. And all I can really see is the rain right in front of my face. Okay, so the power had now been out for about an hour, and I look downstairs, and I'm watching down there, and I'm trying to make out what I'm seeing. And there was suddenly this explosion is a strong word. I would say like flash of like electrical something. And when it flashed, I saw something that didn't make sense to me. And that was the street level. There was a stop sign, and the water was so high that it was halfway up the stop sign, which I don't know. I think that would mean it was 7 or 8 feet deep. And I'm like, how? So keep in mind, I don't know anything about hurricanes. I didn't know anything about storm surge. And I also didn't know that way down at Exchange Place, way down, it was like a mile away. Exchange Place is where the wall was, where the water was. We were actually lower elevation than when that water came over. So all the water that came over came right down to us. But I still can't believe it. I'm like, there is no way I just saw what I think I saw. So I grab a flashlight and I start down the stairs, and I go down 15 flights because we have like a doorman concierge guy, and I'll go down there and see what's going on. So when I get down to the 2nd floor, the door's open, and I look, and the concierge and all the furniture they usually sit on is there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is real. The 1st floor is actually underwater. And I walk in there and I'm like, how's it going? And he's like, not good, man. And he points, and there's a little stairwell, and the water is halfway up the stairwell coming into almost up to the 2nd floor. And he's like, I can't move this furniture again. You know, it's like, there isn't anywhere to go on the 3rd floor. So, you know, I don't know. I hope it doesn't get any higher. And I'm like, oh my God, what have we gotten into? So I go back upstairs. Then a really scary thing happens. A fire alarm goes off. And the way these high rises work, you have like smoke detectors in your room that's for that room. But then you have this kind of global fire alarm that that goes to every room and tells everyone to evacuate. That goes off. Now, my first assumption is it's probably a false alarm and it has something to do with the power being out. But what if it's not? Should I evacuate? I have a wife and kid, you know, here. What do we do? So if there was a fire, and, you know, because water and electronics sometimes don't play well together, if we needed to evacuate, how? You can't. The only way out is through the bottom floor. The bottom floor is underwater. We would have to like break out a window of an apartment and dive out or something. So, and from what I saw, that water, it was like a roaring river. So I don't know what we're supposed to do. So I have to figure it out. So I get a flashlight and I go to the stairway. Now, the problem is this apartment goes up probably 30 to 40 stories, I don't know. And everybody's got the same thought I do. So when I get to that stairway and I open the door, it is packed with people all the way down, moving at a snail's pace, walking together with flashlights down. And so it is dark. I can't see where I'm stepping, but at the same time, all these flashlights are flashing around. So I have little moments where there's too much light. And it's like this just log jam of people going down. And then it gets worse because some people that were the first to go down there have found out it's a false alarm, and they're now coming back up. So we're running into each other. And so I immediately think to myself, okay, these guys talked to the concierge and he said it's a false alarm. Let's go back up. But many of the people who are going downstairs refuse to believe this guy's word and want to hear it for themselves. So they continue to go down, and we just get stuck in this mess of people in a dark stairwell. So that was a very, very bad half hour of my life. I felt very claustrophobic. It was very humid and hot, and it felt like there was no oxygen. So I got back upstairs, and at this point, finally realized, okay, there's really nothing else to do. We're now talking 1, 2 in the morning, so it's time to go to bed. So I go to bed and I wake up the next morning. All right, so the next morning I look out and the sun is out and I can see just disaster everywhere. I see a full dumpster in the middle of the street. There's no cars driving around except an occasional emergency vehicle of some kind. All those cars that were parked on the street have been completely submerged in water overnight. I need to go down there because I have a dog that really wants to be walked, and power's still out. And so I go down the stairwell, and it's pretty busy, a lot of buzz, a lot of people wanting to see what's going on. So I get outside, and there's standing water all over the place. And I go walking down the street. I found a sign that was actually from Exchange Place. So this thing was a mile from where it was supposed to be that had come inland. And, you know, you could just see water had just covered everything. It had completely filled the path station where the train's supposed to go. So that thing's going to be a mess for a while. So I'm walking the dog, and I think this is probably 9 o'clock in the morning. As I'm walking back, I noticed some new friends in the neighborhood. We are about another mile the other direction from a pretty rough neighborhood, pretty rough part of Jersey City. And I never really thought about it before, but if you were going to be a looter, why would you loot your own neighborhood when you can go to the slightly more upscale neighborhood and rob things from them? And I saw someone break through a metal door that they had, like this metal slide down door to cover a storefront. They broke the lock on that. They got it open and they threw a trash can through the window, went in, and they did what everyone who wants to make sure that they're taken care of in an emergency. They stole a bunch of cigarettes. And then I saw someone do it to the liquor store. And so I could see we're going to have a lot of new friends here. And this is not going to be a safe place. So I went back upstairs and I still had my chair parked up against the window, and I looked. And across from us, I could see there was a bank building that had a very big overhang. And there were actually about 40 to 50 people who had slept there, had sleeping bags or pillows, and had just slept on the ground. Because a couple of blocks over, there's a neighborhood where it's a bunch of brownstones, and some people actually lived in basement apartments, and all that stuff had been torn up. So and not to even mention all those cars ruined, completely ruined, and you could see people going out and looking at their cars and kind of like, I felt bad for the people. There was a part of me of kind of like, there was a little bit of an I told you so back here, at least do something to prepare just in case. But I shut that voice off, And so I was curious, how's everybody else doing? So I look at my work email and they're already stressing. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna check here and see how quick we can get back to work, and they're not worried about anything about like, because they don't like to cancel events. They never do unless something just horrific has happened, and they're stressing that people aren't going to be coming to work. Meanwhile, Path Station downstairs is underwater. I have a little radio that I'm listening to, like an emergency radio that I had to like crank to start, and they said that the Hoboken Path Station, which is one of the ones that we kind of shared the train line with, that was just destroyed. Like that thing wasn't going to be operational for weeks and weeks and weeks. They could already tell. So not good. Yeah. Now I have to figure out, what's next. How long is the power going to be out? Is it going to be a day or two? Who knows? All right. So 2 or 3 days have gone by, and already I see an email from work, and this communications lady, she seemed nice as far as I could tell, but she worked for just a pretty rotten person, overall, a very cold, mean person. And so I definitely could see through her email that she's basically got president of the company telling her, tell everybody to get their asses back to work. And she's trying to translate that into a more PR friendly communication email. And it's like, and the first paragraph is, hope everyone is safe and all this stuff like that. And then it says, and then there's like this pause and it says, we need you to get back to work. And it's all like in all caps. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Because like the Path Station downstairs, our train isn't running. Train in Hoboken is destroyed. Like it's gonna be destroyed for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I have to somehow figure out how to get to work, because they're basically saying you are basically going to get like, they tried to kind of make up a category for time off that was like an unexcused absence, or like you would have to use your vacation time, but it would be almost like a violation because you're using vacation time without giving them, heads up ahead of time. There was something very, like they're basically trying to like turn the screws and make you get to work. So I have to look up a bus that will take me there, and I get on this bus and it is packed, and we have to make every single stop on the way to Hoboken, where that entire city has no other way of getting to New York City. And it took me 6 hours to get to work. And I get there and I watch some YouTube videos, and now it's time to go home. And so I sit on a bus, and it's just the most worthless thing, but it was just like a control thing. So while I was at work, they had power and they had internet. Someone leaked the email that was sent out to company-wide telling us to get back to work, and it got to like Deadspin, and then it got to like New York Post, and they're like, here's how heartless this company is. And it was all over the internet of just what a rotten employer this was. I'm like, that's my work. I actually loved working there. I had so many good friends there, but it was like, even my friends, I still stay in touch with them. It's almost like people I was in prison with. Like we've got strong, bonds that are based on this like just shared ridiculousness that we dealt with. And so, yeah, at some point, I don't remember if it was right then or maybe a week later or something like that, but of all things, the lady who sends out the emails, she got fired. Like, you hear things like, don't shoot the messenger. The company actually shot their own messenger. Like the person who sent out the message, they told her to send out. So that was how that was handled. Anyway, after we get this estimate that they're saying power is going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks in Jersey City. So I finally waved the white flag, and I'm like, is there somebody in the family that can come get us? And a family member braved all kinds of highways, mazes, closed roads, all kinds of things, roadblocks, and somehow found a way to pick us up and took us out to the suburbs. So now we were in the area where we lived before we moved to Jersey City. And we stayed out there for probably a month. Okay, so after a month, I come back, and we now have power back. And it had just come back. And I go into the lobby of the apartment, and it smells horrible. It smells like the bottom of a creek and like dead fish. And there's still box fans all over the place, because they still are trying to get this thing completely dried out and try to avoid mold. And it was just completely trashed. And I open up the mailbox, and the mailbox is completely full. There's a month of mail in there. And there's a letter from my apartment, and it says that my lease is coming up soon, and they're going to raise our rent $1,000 a month. And I'm like looking around at this place, this trashed apartment, and I'm like, they gotta be kidding me. Like, there is no way this place is going to even remotely be livable anytime soon, and they're gonna jack up my rent? What are they thinking? And the whole neighborhood, like all these, there was the Dunkin' Donuts there, it was trashed, it was still closed. There was a Starbucks that had opened back up, but it's like when I looked at a lot of the mom and pop places, they were just screwed out of business. And one of the things that was really alarming is all those cars from a month earlier were still there, except people had like spray painted on them, and it would say like Allstate claim number 495. So the cars were so like bricked, so like ruined and unusable, that they would just spray paint the claim number so the insurance company would know what car to come pick up. So needless to say, when the lease was up, I moved out to the suburbs, and I was, and lived out there a couple of more years. And the funny thing is, I really wanted to move back there. I missed that short commute. And I figured, it's been a couple of years. I figured maybe that place has kind of rebuilt itself and, is back up and running. And it was actually hilarious to see what was there when I got back. Because, first of all, I looked at my exact apartment that I used to live in, and it cost double what it did when I lived there. And it was completely out of my price range now. And that Dunkin' Donuts that I mentioned, it had been rebuilt into a gigantic 4-level bar complex, super high-end stuff. And there was like a little vacant shop that was next to it. That thing had turned into a just really high-end restaurant. And I realized that this whole place they knew what they were doing. Like this apartment complex, everything. I mean, they just cashed in insurance money, and this place was way more expensive than it ever was. And as of, like a couple of years after that, it actually was the most expensive zip code in America. And like this place had become so high end. So it was ridiculous. So what I thought was a gentrified neighborhood was actually mid-gentrification, and it was now completely out of my price range and will be for the rest of my life. So they came out just fine. And I know that from when I made out the checks for rent, it was Kushner Real Estate. That's like Jared Kushner's dad's company. That's like old school real estate. Like they know that game. So I wasn't surprised that, they weren't left holding any bag by any stretch of the imagination. And so So yeah, that was Hurricane Sandy. I ended up moving back to Jersey City. We moved there to another part of town, and never dealt with any other hurricanes or anything like that. But yeah, crap. Huh.
Hipster hobbies, so much